Last week, Ontario's Auditor General raised several concerns about how $500 million in legal aid funding is deployed in this province. As one of the last means by which low-income Ontarians can secure legal representation, getting the allocations right matters a great deal for all. Let's get a better sense of the issues with David McKillop. He is Vice President, Strategy and Public Affairs at Legal Aid Ontario. John Callahan, partner at Gowling WLG and chair of the Law Society of Ontario's Legal Aid Working Group. Suzanne Johnson, director of the Community and Legal Aid Services Program at York University's Osgoode Hall Law School. Julie Matthews, executive director of Community Legal Education Ontario, that's CLEO for short. And Avi Go, clinic director of the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic. And we are delighted, Avi, to have you back. You're almost a regular around here. And to the other four of you who are here for the first time, we're happy to welcome you to TVO tonight as well. Julie, get us started. Access to justice is obviously job one for all of you folks, and I want to know what it means to you.
Well, for me, it doesn't mean sort of what it's often thought of, which is, people think of access to justice as being access to courts and to lawyers and sort of that whole formal system. To me, it's access to the legal help that people need so that they can deal with their problems in an effective way. And for me, the context for access to justice is making sure that people who can't get that help can get it, and those are often people who live with low incomes or who are racialized or who don't speak either official language or live in rural and remote locations. And so access to justice means making sure that they can participate in the justice system and exercise their rights.
Let me do a quick follow-up with everybody, starting with you then. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning access is awful, it's terrible, you can't get it when you need it, 10 meaning we live in utopia, where are we in the province of Ontario?
I would say 4.
4? Okay, that's not a good grade. How about you?
I mean, we've done a lot in that area to improve it, but there's still lots of work to be done. I would say 5, 6.
A little better? Okay. How about you?
I would say it depends. For the clients we serve, poorer people, I would say 4. Middle class, I would say probably a bit higher, maybe 6. So those are the two.
So for $500 million, we're not doing too well if we're only getting a 4 or a 5.
Exactly.
Okay. Avi, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I agree that it really all depends on who you are. For the marginalized group, if we have like women, people with disability, racialized groups, it's probably between 3 and 4. If you are well off, like you can hire your own lawyer and, and the system actually operates in your favor, then yeah, it's much higher.
Okay, David, we're talking about your backyard here. What number would you put on it?
All right. I would give it 2 scores. For the folks who qualify for Legal Aid Ontario services, I would give a fairly high mark. I'd say maybe around a 7. For people who are in, upper middle class, wealthy folks who can pay for their own legal services, I would give them upwards of an 8 as well. It's those people who are in the middle, who do not qualify for legal aid services and do not have the means to pay for legal services out of their own pockets. I think they have a much tougher time. And I'd give them around a 3 or a 4.
You give them a 3 or 4. But for legal aid, for the people who are, the poorest among us, who need your services, who need access to your money, you're going as high as 7 for them.
I am going as high as 7 for them.
Now, that's a bit of a disconnect with everything else I'm hearing here. You want to come in on that, Suzanne?
The reason I gave it a low number is that we turn away at our clinic, we turn away so many people because we just don't have the resources. So I wonder what happens to those people that we turn away. So we're constantly trying to, put Band-Aids on issues, and so that's why I think it's a lower number.
How come you're going as high as 7 when she's only at a 3? What are we missing here?
Well, I think a lot of the people that Suzanne are referring to that they are not able to serve are those people in the middle that I referred to earlier. Legal Aid Ontario runs a very extensive program to provide legal services for people in this province who cannot afford them.
Just tell us how it works, actually.
Sure. So we offer like a spectrum of services for people. From our duty counsel program, which is when people show up in the courts on the day of. We have lawyers in all the courts in Ontario to provide assistance on that day. It's generally what is considered a brief service. So there may be a representation on an adjournment, a guilty plea, negotiating with the Crown for a diversion. that type of thing. Then there is the certificate program, which is where we provide one-on-one legal assistance for people who qualify for that service. And then we fund the community legal clinics like Julie's and the student legal aid clinics like Suzanne's.
Okay, Julie, when it comes to the public perception of legal aid, what do you think the most significant challenge is?
I think the most significant challenge is people understanding the importance of legal aid and, in fact, access to justice. And I think a lot of people just don't realize that they are likely to experience a legal problem in their lives, that those legal problems can affect, you know, their ability to remain in their apartment, their, you know, ability to get, you know, minimum wage, that sort of thing. And that it's really important that people whose those basic human needs are at stake, that they need legal services and legal aid provides them. And so the impact is serious, the prevalence, the fact that legal problems are so common. I think building an understanding of the public of those factors, I think would go a long way to building support for legal aid, and I think that's critical.
You want to add to that, John?
Well, I think you have to look at this as a continuum. I mean, legal aid starts in about 1946, that post-war generation that believed in the social safety net, universal health care. In the 1960s, human rights. In the 1980s, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That bold group of people. And, you know, it gets redesigned in the 60s in the Judicare model under, you know, the guys you know, Davis, Robarts, Roy McMurtry, these big thinkers. And then we have an open system for a period of time where anybody who qualifies can get it. And then we have a closed system after 1994 with cutbacks. And now we're here again at the cutback stage. And it's a very disconcerting issue because the founders of legal aid and that whole group believed if you had a right, you had to have access to a remedy. And I just don't know whether we're going to continue that. Whether there's going to be a clawback on that where people figure, I don't get it, why do you get it? And I think that's a challenge we're going to have. So it's exactly what's talked about in terms of the spiral effect that we have to start looking at.
Let's bring up the first of a few graphics we're going to go through during the course of the evening. Sheldon, bottom of page 2 here, if we can. We spend in Canada almost, you can see that number at the top there in the middle, almost $1 billion nationally on legal aid expenditures. It's a little over $900 million. And look how it divides across the country. Now, here in the province of Ontario, we represent 38% of the population of the country, but apparently spend 53% of the legal aid dollars. And the other provinces, much less significant as you go down the list here. Now, David, Ontario has somehow managed to build up a strong financial commitment to legal aid over the decades, as John was just describing to us. Yep. But you've got to be really quite poor to be eligible to receive it. Why is that?
Well, as John referenced in his remarks, up until the early 1990s, legal aid was a demand-driven process. It was like Ontario Works, welfare. It was like Ontario Disability Support. If you qualified for it, you got it. And it wasn't a matter of budget. But the costs of legal aid in Ontario were spiraling in the 1990s. You know, we're all here to talk about access to justice. There's a lot of unmet need out there. You know, and we have found ourselves sometimes, you know, unable to meet everyone's needs. Suzanne referenced that about the people that they turn away. So, you know, it is a very difficult issue when it comes to finding ways to serve all the people who have need. Ontario is very lucky. We have a government that's been very supportive of legal aid in this province. As the graphic showed, we spend more per citizen in Ontario than any other jurisdiction in the country. We're very proud of that fact. You know, I would say that it's not a race to the bottom here, that if you can have the best legal aid program in the country, you should be proud of it.
Well, here's how legal aid was spent last year. And again, we're going to go to our second graphic here now. Sheldon, thank you. Legal aid services in the province of Ontario. This is for the fiscal year 17-18. And overwhelmingly, you can see that green wedge of the pie at the bottom. 55% of legal aid dollars are spent on criminal law cases. And then just over a quarter on family law. Immigration and refugee law comes in at 13%, civil law at 5%. That's how we spend the money. Julie, if criminal law is the focus of legal aid, how is demand met for all of the other areas?
The demand for the other areas are met by a range, sort of a continuum of legal services provided through community legal clinics who serve low-income people, and provided through other legal aid programs. For CLEO, we provide sort of a range of education and information programs that we intend to, we put out there so that they intersect with people's, where people are going to get help and information and education, so that they can use it. They can tap into the information at the beginning of a legal problem, sort of further along, and they can use it in many different ways, because with recent sort of developments in technology, the power of legal information has just increased exponentially.
Avi, what percentage of the people who you think need your services actually get your services?
Well, the way we operate is that, we serve primarily just low-income clients from the Chinese and Southeast Asian community. All of them are immigrants or refugees or people without status, all racialized, and a lot of them don't know anything about the legal system or don't know their rights. So we try to provide a range of services, like, just like any other clinics do. Sometimes we provide direct legal representation. Sometimes we give advice. Sometimes we provide free brief services. And we do a lot of community legal education. So there are many other ways. The clinics also reach out to hundreds of thousands of people a year. But I want to go back to a point that David has made. I think we should be proud of the fact that Ontario has such a good legal aid system. It's actually one of the jewel of, among legal aid system in the entire world. And I think that sometimes, on its face, it seems like we're spending a lot of money, but it's money well spent. But there are other ways that we can cut back on legal aid spending. So, for instance, if you look at the 53% criminal cases, people need legal aid because they are being charged. Just the other day, we got a report from the Ontario Human Rights Commission talking about how certain communities are over-policed, they're over-represented in the criminal justice system. If you want to cut back on legal aid, maybe we should also look at how police are laying charges.
You know who said the same thing in this very studio not too long ago? We're going to show you. Roll the clip, please.
What happens right now is the police are the front line. The police only know and are only able to basically do one thing: charge them or not charge them. But they can't make them better or take them to a place where they might get better or start to get better. So what happens is they charge them, and then the next thing you know, they have a record, and then they can't get a job, and then they have terms on their release that requires them to come back, and it's a revolving door, but it's a revolving door of its own making. The criminal legal system feeds itself. That's what it does. And if we wanted to lower crime, one way would be to charge less.
There's former Attorney General Michael Bryant. John, what do you think of the advice?
Well, I think there's a wider context to that, and that's the spiral effect that when you don't have legal representation, leave aside legal aid, but legal representation. I mean, what he's talking about is a system that self-generates, but it also throws things into the social safety net. So, for example, you get convicted and you're incarcerated where you might not have been had you had proper legal representation. You lose your job, you lose your housing, you're under the social safety net. And it's a big problem. And I don't think we've done a very good job explaining to the public the cost savings legal aid provides and legal representation provides. In other jurisdictions, and we were talking about this offline here, was they have better data in the justice system that is then worked into to find out the economic impact. In Australia, for every dollar spent, they say $1.30 to $1.40 is returned. In Florida, they say it's $4.75. In New York State, they say $5. Now, how you calculate that, what do you take into consideration? The costs of the legal system, which is overburdened by unrepresented people, and the cost of being thrown into the social safety net, when you didn't have to be. I think there's a study, even in Canada, that $800 million is expended in their healthcare system because of legal-related issues. We don't do a very good job. As I just told you earlier, people think of this as the great social experiment coming out of World War II and that greatest generation, and it's the liberty issue that we've all been weaned on. but there's an economic benefit, and we have not done a good job, and partly because we don't have the data, which we can talk about.
Okay, let's throw some more data out here. Okay, middle of page 4, Sheldon.
I wasn't asking for that.
Here it comes. This is, we're going to talk about, these initials here, ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program. There are lots of cases in the legal aid system for people who are on disability supports. $21 million over the 16-17 fiscal year. That's almost a quarter of the budget. Almost 10,000 cases, 44% of the workload. Who can tell me why that is the case? Why disabled people are so disproportionately represented in those numbers? Avi.
Well, it's not the case for all the clinics. So, for instance, in the case of our clinic, we actually have a much lower percentage of ODSP cases because of the client we serve. Like, we tend to have more employment issues or immigration issue and so on and so forth. But for a lot of clinics, that is one of the challenges that they face. But it's a result of the decision makers within the Ministry of Community and Social Services and how they decide who gets ODSP.
We should say 75% of the ODSP appeals are against that ministry, Community and Social Services.
And successful.
Yeah, and having representation from legal clinics actually increase your chance of getting an appeal granted as well. So I think that one of the recommendations made by the Auditor General is to look at what can be done to improve the quality of the decision-making at the ministry level, which I think is a good idea. And similarly, it doesn't have to be just the ministry. For instance, we have a lot of clients who come to us because their employers are not paying them wages, and that's as a result of the lack of enforcement by the Ministry of Labor. If Ministry of Labor actually enforce a lot of these, the minimum wage or overtime kind of requirement, then the clients don't have to come to clinics to get assistance. So I think we need to look at the overall system and how the government enforce statutes that provide protection for low-income people and other marginalized groups, and to talk, to have a conversation about how overall, globally, we can spend less on enforcing the law.
All right, to that end, David, the Auditor General did take a look at Legal Aid Ontario in her report this year. She made a number of recommendations related to Legal Aid Ontario. Let me just ask you a very open-ended question. Which challenge or which problem that the Auditor General identified do you think was the most urgent and that you guys are capable of doing something about?
I'm going to take us into an area where we haven't been before, and that is funding that we receive from the federal government for refugee services. As we all know from listening to the news, the media of late, there's been a huge increase in the number of people seeking refugee status in Canada, and most of these people actually end up in front of the Immigration and Refugee Board. So there's been huge demands put on the board. There's been huge demands put on Legal Aid Ontario and the other legal aid programs in the country that cover refugee legal aid services.
Let's just understand that this is a federal policy which has provincial ramifications.
Absolutely.
The feds make a policy decision. The province has to pick up the tab for that decision.
That is correct.
The province isn't too happy about that.
That is correct.
That is also correct. Do you think that basically the Auditor General has invited the government of Ontario to go to Ottawa with a case for more money?
That's correct.
Okay, I think I got that. Here's where, let's go federal while we're at it. Bill C-75. This is the proposed federal legislation meant to revamp the justice system, make it more efficient. It just passed third reading, I think. Hasn't gone to the Senate yet, but the senators are going to take a look at it soon. It's had a lot of pushback. Suzanne, can you tell us how you think this Bill C-75, which the feds think will make justice more efficient, will it actually do that?
Well, first of all, it's a huge bill. So our part in it, there's students represent criminal matters in the Ontario Court of Justice. So what they're called the summary offenses, which are the least serious offenses. So right now, our students could appear for our clients in criminal courts. So these clients would otherwise be unrepresented. So we help clients go through the system, and it's been very efficient for, I would say, 40 years. This bill classifies criminal offenses, and one of the consequences is that summary offenses now, the maximum penalty for all summary offenses has increased to 2 years less a day, which means, it's a very technical argument, but what you need the public to know from this is that students no longer can appear before Ontario Court of Justice for Criminal Courts. So that means that the representation that we've been providing, that the administrative justice loves, the judges loves our students when they appear because we know the system, students can no longer do that. So the solution, we appeared before the Justice Committee to make our suggestions how it could be amended, but instead they didn't accept our amendments, and it's they've said we could go to the province. They could make it's called lieutenant and counsel regulations to allow our students to appear. So now, similar to the whole issue with immigration, it now becomes, we're kind of caught in the middle because it has passed. Now it's going to be before the Senate, but now we have to approach the province to see if they'll grant our students the ability to appear for this much needed.
Want to know what the province has to say about this?
I would. I'd like
We've
to
got a
know.
little quote here. Let's bring this up. Here's what the province of Ontario says. Given that Bill C-75 is still being considered by Parliament, no decisions have been made at this point by the Government of Ontario. We will be following the progress of the bill and we'll be considering its impact on the people of Ontario. What does that mean?
It's very concerning to me. It's very difficult when you're dealing with two different areas of the government, and our clients are the ones that will suffer if this doesn't, Lieutenant Council's not passed. So I'm hoping that the province will be open to pass this because we serve the most vulnerable people, and without our help, as people have already pointed out, the system's already backlogged, and this will create further problems, inefficiencies.
And it's a big issue. The Law Society, we went up and spoke on it too, because right now students are under our jurisdiction in terms of their ability to practice, and so are paralegals, both of whom were excluded because of this. And it's a big issue as to deciding whether or not 2 years is too much for a student or a paralegal, and whether there's another compromise. And we went up to Ottawa, as you did, and when we went up, they hadn't actually been alive to the issue. It came up by the opposition brought it up as well, and they really didn't address it. And it's now left to come back to the provincial level, and yet it's a structural issue that's going to be hard to figure out how you're going to be able to figure a case was within a competency of a student or a paralegal when in fact they removed that at the federal level because the province won't be able to put it back.
Julie, here's the thing. We have a federal Liberal government making national overall policy. We have a progressive conservative provincial government which is expected to enact that policy. It will have views on its own priorities. We shouldn't be surprised that these two different governments at different levels of different partisan stripes don't agree necessarily on what to do here. So what happens?
What happens in terms of what people need is, we I think that the answer is to push on to work, for those of us who care about access to justice, for us to work together. I don't think there's a single solution, but sort of working on Bill C-75, taking lots of other approaches to try and improve the range of services that low-income people in particular can receive, and tackling it from a number of different angles. I don't think there's a single answer as much as I wish there were.
If I could, to me, it doesn't really matter which party is in power. I think that from the point of view of the people who are affected, that the change itself is not reasonable because there's another implication as a result of this. Under the immigration law, if you're found guilty of a criminal offense, if you're not a citizen, you can be deported. And by increasing the maximum penalty, it actually increases the chance that people will be deported without the right to appeal. And that's a serious issue for people of color because they are also overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So, I mean, this is a law presented by the liberal, progressive, kind of liberal federal government. So, and that goes back to my point about, the access to justice for my community is between 3 and 4, point because It's not just about how accessible legal aid is. It is also about the law and the substantive law, whether those laws are in fact having a negative impact on the clients that we serve as well.
Okay, let me check with, you know what, I want to do one thing on family. Can I do family? Because the one thing on that pie chart, you know, criminal law was number one, but number two was family. And, okay, David, why don't you tackle this one? We are hearing that 50 to 80% of the people who go to family court who are eligible for legal aid are representing themselves. Is this a good idea?
No, it's a horrible idea. You know, like I said, about a quarter of the matters that go through the family courts in Ontario are represented by Legal Aid Ontario. And then they're going to obviously be the people who can afford their own lawyers. As I said, the people at the upper echelons. Again, it's those folks in the middle that I referred to earlier in the program that are going to be on the short end of the stick here, having to represent their own interests in the family law courts. They don't qualify for legal aid services. They can't afford private legal aid services. So it slows down the courts, probably leads to poorer results for these individuals.
They probably don't represent themselves as well as a lawyer would.
I would like
Fair
to
to
think
say.
so. I think that's very fair to say. But I think we need to almost step back and say, are these types of disputes, should they be in the courts in the first place?
If not, then where?
Well, there's obviously there's been a big push for mediation in Ontario to see whether disputes in a family law context can be mediated outside the court process. The results eventually have to be presented to the courts and orders taken out. But are there other ways that disputes can be resolved? Maybe there are technology solutions. You know, we're hearing about artificial intelligence and its ability to resolve disputes. I'm not saying it's the answer to everything. It is being used effectively, you know, for disputes through, you know, people who purchase things from sellers on eBay type of thing. Maybe it's a horrible idea for resolving family law disputes. I don't know. But what I do know is that the family courts are clogged. There are a lot of unrepresented people in there, and I don't see huge new investments coming into the family justice system.
Okay, we got a few minutes left here, and I want to tackle money, fees. Here we go. Shall we read this? Here's from one criminal defense lawyer in Ottawa. Hourly rates over $400 are not uncommon for lawyers, and we wonder why there is an access to justice problem. Civil lawyers need to take a hard look in the mirror and come to grips with the role they have played in creating the access to justice problem. They need to lower their fees. It is great that some lawyers volunteer their time to Pro Bono Ontario, but more can and must be done. That's Michael Spratt writing in Criminal Lawyer. Okay, John, your take on that.
Well, I think it's a bit perplexing on the hourly rate issue. I mean, we have a situation where we say we have an overabundance of lawyers. You know, about 25,000 practicing lawyers, 40,000 total, but 25,000 practicing. And yet you would think economies of scale and the reality of an economic market would push rates to a point where they'd be more affordable.
And it's not.
It's not. Maybe, and I think we need to have a tackle on that and see what are the issues are. Is it the fact that we've got a 7-year post-secondary education system where they're building up huge debt? Is it the cost of practice? There was a statistic I heard at a recent seminar that for sole practitioners, after they've done all their administration, kept their staff happy, they're billing about 2.5-3 hours a day and collecting about an hour and under 2 hours. That was the statistic that they gave, but whether that's true or not. But at $400 an hour, you'd see that's not a great return on a $100,000+ investment for an education.
Right. How about this? Let me try this.
But I mean, I think I think we've got structural issues that we have to take a look at.
Right. Incidentally, Canadian Lawyer Magazine, not Criminal Lawyer Magazine, as I misstated earlier. The idea of adding a so-called access to justice levy to lawyers' annual fees, that has been floated as an idea. Right. Julie, I see you nodding your head. You like that idea?
I like that idea a lot. And I know that California, I know other states in the U.S. go that way. I think good funding for legal aid is essential, and funding for other things that I think probably improve access to justice as well.
So not just taxpayers, but lawyers themselves ought to be contributing to legal aid?
I think so.
Can I say?
Go ahead.
I mean, first of all, I think people have to understand that the Law Foundation of Ontario, which derives its money from lawyers' trust accounts, contributes 75% to legal aid and 25% to CLEO and other agencies who are doing good work. David will know the numbers, but the numbers are going up because interest rates are going up.
So you think lawyers are doing their bit already?
Well, I think there is an element, and the Law Society does it. Here's the problem. The problem with it is the Law Society, by definition, is a licensing body. It's not a taxing agency. It is to pay for licensing. And there may be some room in there to do it. The difficulty is it becomes a regressive tax because those who aren't making a whole lot of money are still going to have to pay the levy. And it may not be the best way to fund it. I mean, these are big issues. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. These are big societal issues. And we need leadership at the political level to step up, recognize these are big issues, use their statutory powers and their taxing powers to resolve it. It's not going to be resolved in the back of 25,000 practicing lawyers in a province of this size. It just isn't. I mean, that's the problem.
Let me save 20 seconds for you.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you could have a graduated levy. I mean, what I see in the U.S. compared to here is that the lawyers, the private bar lawyers, are really active in supporting legal aid, and not just the pro bono movement, and how we can transfer that kind of enthusiasm and support for legal aid by the private bar, I think would be a step forward.
That would be a step forward.
You know the other problem? The other problem is we're out of time. That's our time. But we want to thank the five of you for coming in tonight and helping us out with this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.